Hello, Jarv. We're missing our coffee chat.
Oh, is it double booked? Yeah, it looks like it is.
I'm triple booked. This, the coffee chat, and a social call.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I've got that too. But I never go to the social call.
Yeah, me neither.
Not really a social person.
Me neither.
Yeah. I like computers, though.
Hi, Myron.
Hey, Scarbeck, Jarv. These days, computer is actually the only social thing you need, apparently.
It's so bad,
Yeah.
too.
Screw 2020, seriously.
Yeah, my wife is telling me all my friends are in RimWorld. Have you ever played RimWorld, Marin?
No.
You would definitely, don't play it. You would definitely like it. It's like kind of like Factorio rolled
No,
in.
I can't. I can't.
Yeah.
I can't do another one of those. It ruined my life.
Yeah, no, this would definitely ruin your life, but it's awesome.
Okay, okay.
Cool. Should we get started?
Yes, let's do that.
All right. So, Scarbeck, we went through the blockers this morning. There's nothing new. Basically, we just cleaned up the issues that are no longer relevant or no longer blockers or ones that we've worked around. And then we just reduced the list to the things that we're tracking, which basically is build traces or build logs, the service mapping, and then the cross-AZ network traffic.
Okay.
I did a quick tour of the multi-cluster stuff this morning. I don't think there is anything new there for you because you've been reviewing the changes.
I could also watch the recording as well.
Yeah, yeah. So basically, everything is fine. We'll just continue with the work to get k8s workloads compatible with multi-cluster, which is going to be a challenge. But Graham and I talked through it a little bit. He seems like he's okay with the changes so far.
Your last bullet point is about the timeouts for the Git service. Is that the grace period timeout and the blackout timeout that you've been trying to work on lately?
Yeah, so I opened up an issue for this, and I can show you, I can kind of demo. So what we want to do is just kind of assess the impact of interrupted connections whenever we cycle pods. And we were just discussing how, um, you know, we're going to be cycling pods a lot, and it's quite a bigger impact than it is on virtual machines because we have the safety of training HA proxy plus installing the omnibus before we interrupt those connections by sending the SIGINT to Puma. So right now, those connections are being interrupted we only have a 10-second window. If you look at all of the projects and like how long we stream data from Gitly for Git HTTPS specifically, the 99th percentile hovers around 6 seconds. So it's actually, I think 10 seconds is probably fine for the majority of projects. If you look at just GitLab though, the story changes significantly. If you look in like the GitLab namespace, you can see that the 99th percentile jumps up to like 40 seconds. And if you look at www.gitlab.com, it's terrible. Like we have, and of course, if anyone who's cloned www.gitlab.com looks. So I think what was happening is that we were kind of hurting ourselves a bit with Kubernetes
Yeah.
on Canary, which could explain why we were seeing like a small number of errors. I think I'm still thinking 2 minutes is the right number for us. So I'd like to start with that. We can talk about possibly bringing it down
Let's start with
a
5.
little bit. Start with 5 minutes. I'm wondering what the impact will be, and maybe Scarbeck, if we prevent these pods from terminating for 5 minutes, that's going to slow us down pretty significantly, right?
We're going to see that for deployments as well as anytime our pod the PDB, whatever that acronym stands for, is
Pod
impacted by.
destruction
So
budget.
Construction budget. Yeah.
yes, that. So during cluster upgrades, this will significantly slow those operations down.
Yeah. Okay.
Because pods will take forever to terminate. I don't
Yeah.
think the deployment may necessarily slow down because there's always going to be a pod behind it replacing it. We'll just be waiting for all pods to terminate. So we might want to do a test at 5 minutes with, say do this on pre, set the amount of pods to something we guess production will see, and just do a deployment and just watch what happens and see how quickly Helm returns. I
Okay.
imagine it's going to wait for the same amount of pods to be running, but if it takes a long time to cycle through those, that will obviously impact deployment times. But I think that is still a lot less than our impact today in terms of deploying to the Git fleet. So it all
Yeah.
depends on how many pods we end up spinning up, I guess.
One item on this issue is for me to get the exact window of time we have on VMs. So that'll be a good comparison point. So we at least know we're no worse than what we have on VMs. I
Yep.
think VMs is around like 2 to 3 minutes. It might be as long as 5 minutes, but I have to check.
But the reason why I was saying 5 minutes is mostly because you remember like when we started, like we were playing with the number of pods with first Sidekick shards that we were migrating, we were setting ourselves too low, which created some unnecessary churn. Like we can overshot this and like see the impact and like lower it. It's easier than just
True.
creating a lot of noise, like whether we are
Yeah.
causing a problem or not, or whatever is happening there, you know?
It'd really be nice if we could just set if the blackout period just exited after all connections were done, that would speed up things greatly. But it sounds like it's just going to hang and wait
No, it
for
doesn't do that.
upwards of 5 minutes, and that sounds kind of crappy.
We also found, at least with HA proxy, remember we added this hard stop after option to kill HA proxy processes because inevitably there's always a connection that's just hanging on forever with Git SSH, not Git HTTPS. But so I think even if we track the number of connections, it's possible it wouldn't.
That's true.
It wouldn't matter. And also, it's I think this is specifically the blackout period is specifically for Puma, and these HTTPS connections aren't going through Puma. Puma is interacting with Workhorse to do the authorization, and then Workhorse is going gRPC directly to Gitaly. So our liveliness is going through to Puma, but really Puma isn't the one that's keeping these connections open forever. It's Workhorse. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I don't think the blackout period would know if there's an active connection for Workhorse. I think to do that, we would need like a Workhorse liveliness or something, right? That would, Workhorse would need to tell us if there's an open connection, not Puma.
That's unfortunate.
Okay, well,
I'd love to see something around those lines improve so that we can utilize that as a metric to determine if we could shut a pod down.
Yeah.
Cool. Slightly related to this, your merge request that you had in, I tried to take some feedback that we got from Jason and add a test and such, but I pulled that near the end of my day. I opened up a merge request against your merge request, but the test does not work yet, and I can't understand why. So I don't know if you want to try to take that over or just try to push that merge request forward regardless of it, but I'll leave that to you.
Yeah, I mean, we're working off the GitLab comp branch for now, and then we'll get this other thing reviewed as quick as possible so we can switch back to master.
Yep, that makes sense.
Go.
Okay, I'm next. Do you all want to see what I'm looking for during the evaluations of Sidekick queues?
Yeah, sure.
It's nodding his head at least. Okay. I didn't really prepare anything, so I'm just gonna kind of walk through the things I look at. But I've got a list of everything that I do look at inside of this very long issue at this point, where I'm migrating queues from catch-all to catch NFS. Under the evaluation section is like everything that I'll be clicking on here. So one of the first things that we look at is a query that Andrew helped me put together. We have a tool that he created that's installed and running on all the Sidekick catch-all or catch NFS fleet servers. So this is what things look like when we're actively using NFS. In this case, this was the mailers queue last week when we identified that it was using NFS unnecessarily. That has since been fixed. So these days, there's nothing running on catch NFS. But what we want to see is basically nothing, which nothing, but we want it to say 0. So if I go back to like yesterday or something, things should be 0. Yeah, so we had a bunch of queues running on catch NFS and they were not making NFS calls. So this is what we want to see for this particular chart. And whoa. All we're doing is we're just creating a comparison of whether a job was running versus whether it actually actively used NFS. And this is such that we have enough times that we've captured enough data to be confident that we are actively using NFS. Because if we see a little spike, it doesn't necessarily mean we use NFS, it just means we probably tried to read some data or something. But we want to try to hit all possible scenarios. The other query I look into is the actual NFS operations that comes from our node metrics. So this is what catch NFS looks like today. There's always something that the operating system is doing. So these I usually ignore, but for an idea of where we are today for our catch-all fleet, we still have quite a few pieces that are being accessed. So soon, I plan to migrate more queues off of catch-all into catch NFS, and the goal here would be to move them because their execution rate is so low that we could capture as much data as possible and also submit that data to those like 18 plus issues that I had opened for InfraDev that we removed the label for. But that way we could help getting direction from engineering as to how to proceed forward with those issues. And then one of the last few things I look at is inside of Sentry itself. So here, I'm looking specifically at the catch NFS shard for anything unresolved. And we're just looking for anything that looks like it's touching directories that would be using NFS. So there's a few in here that kind of look a little iffy. So here's one as an example. We're trying to we're trying to read from a directory called SRV GitLab shared temp. I think this is probably coming from a pod, but in earlier events, this would have been our var opt GitLab store that's been NFS mounted. We no longer mount the temp directory. So this is one that I know I could ignore because if we look at all the events, it only says 139, but I know there's more than that because I've seen it in other areas. We used to see all the catch-all virtual machines in here. And this has been happening since April. So stuff like this, I know I could ignore because we're not using that NFS mount since April of this year. But I did open up an issue because we definitely have something that's not working correctly for this particular worker. In this case, it's the repository import.
Or rather, it's working by accident.
Exactly. So
So
like it's still trying to, good.
No, go ahead.
So it's still checking for something that we used to have mounted, but we no longer have this mounted. So this will always fail because, it's not going to exist for these servers, nor the pods. So I opened up an issue to start that discussion, and there's a few people chiming in to figure out what needs to be done with that.
Can you link that issue in the demo doc, just so I have it as a reference? Thank you.
And then there's another one that caught my attention, if I could find it quickly. So this is another repository import worker. Oh, I thought I created an issue for this. This one, nope, it's not this one. Maybe that's why I didn't show an issue. Maybe it was this one. This one doesn't look familiar though. Okay, so this one's showing the same behavior where it's trying to access an entire repository. But I know this was never possible inside of our catch-all fleet because we don't mount this directory inside of our sidekick nodes. And if we actually go down further, we see that the error message is spawning from our Gitly nodes. So for stuff like this, I also ignored completely. But outside of that, the majority of all these errors are just the standard errors that we get across all sidekick servers. You know, there's always some sort of execution that expired or some unable to access some other URL that's related to someone's job reaching out to do some work, or failure to import stuff or failure to export stuff. This is very popular to see. So like these are the primary three things that I look at when I'm evaluating whether or not it's safe to migrate a queue into Kubernetes.
I mean, that's awesome that you're doing that, but it also makes me sad that this is the only way we get to do this. It
I'm
means that
not
we have
sure how
absolutely
else
no
to do this though.
visibility into features and what they are doing actually,
Yeah.
right? Like your import might be failing for since April, and nowhere, anywhere this is visible in our monitoring.
No.
Maybe it's visible as error ratios, but they are probably drowned with other, right? Like it's
Yeah,
low enough.
the one that was showing you the repository import work that was failing, that's 189 failures, but that job runs very often. So we never hit the error rate trigger for that particular queue.
And that's staging or production?
This is production
Okay.
that I'm looking at.
Well, that makes me feel a bit better because if it's production, then chances are that that's old, that's done, right? Like yeah. Again, the problem is that it might be working by chance rather than on purpose.
It could
That's the
just be
concern I have.
raising because it's part of the process, but it's an unnecessary raise, which
Yeah, exactly.
if we find out that to be true, I feel like that's a little frustrating because we get so many errors inside a century. I find it a little ridiculous.
Yeah.
But that's really all I had to show for that particular line item. So unless
Awesome.
you all had any questions, we can move on.
I'm fine with moving on unless Jarv has more questions.
All right, well, let's move on. Is there anything else, Jarb, that you wanted to talk about bloggers, or should I just watch the recording for that?
Yeah, I don't think there's nothing there that's new information for you. But yeah, feel free to watch the recording.
Yep.
Let's go to your item because the world versus GCP is something I shared with Graham.
Okay, so I will share my screen yet again. This is mostly a question / looking for feedback. So batch 3 was defined, and it's actually inside of Kubernetes at this moment in time. Batch 4 I have defined. Basically anything that was in batch 3, but I wasn't getting enough data for, I decided to push out. That way I could just get rid of batch 3 and move those into Kubernetes as quickly as possible. So I'm sorry if my font size is not large enough. But here I've selected, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 queues slated for batch 4. I've already created a merge request. Java, I'm waiting reviews. But the execution rate for all these is very low, like less than 1 per second across all of these. And some of these don't even show up, so I can't even get them to show up in our charts, which means they probably haven't executed in the last 24 hours. My goal here for batch 4 is to move them off of the catch-all fleet into the catch NFS fleet. That way we could use our tooling to capture as much data as possible. With the execution rate being so low, I don't suspect that this will have any sort of negative impact because the amount of workers on catch NFS is a lot less than catch all. So that's my goal with batch 4, and all these were just the ones that were pushed out. Our last demo meeting, these cron jobs were slated for the following batch because we didn't have any information about those. They were just marked as yes. I noted somewhere in some issue that I did do the necessary research, and I referred back to the research we'd done. Cron jobs only add something to the queue. They don't actually perform the actual work. There's a different job that will pick up the work and do that. So if it's that job that requires NFS, we'll handle that separately, but at least the cron jobs, we should be able to move those without issue. So with that in mind, I guess, do you have questions so far?
Okay. Did you figure out, or did you look into what group destroy actually is?
No, I did not look into what it is.
Shouldn't deal with NFS at all.
I wouldn't
but
think
it sounds
so.
ominous. That's why I'm asking.
Why is this? Yeah, so needs investigation. So this was the information that I was provided. So because of that, I'm performing that investigation to some extent by moving it to catch-all or catch NFS. I hate these names. Moving it to catch NFS and seeing if it accesses NFS.
Okay.
So, we've done batches 1, 2, and 3 already. Batch 4 is being defined. My next goal, because I suspect batch 4 will take a while. Like I'll probably want to leave that operating on catch NFS for maybe a week just to make sure the jobs were executed enough that we have a high confidence that we are or are not using our shared storage. But after that, what's blocked is everything I created issues for already. I figured what we would do, Amy got me the epics that are associated with some of these. So like the pages one, we know there's an epic for, and for the ones that are related to build traces, we have issues for. What I thought about doing was after batch 4 is completed, moving all of these over, not moving, well, yes, moving all these over just to figure out what data is being written or read from where, and adding that to these issues that I've created to help bolster the need to have someone investigate these as much as possible. Like at this moment in time, I don't know what to do with these issues except for adding information through discovery.
And I think that on its own wouldn't be helpful to developers as well. Maybe they know, but you would also need to spend a lot of time to give them the context of what does this actually mean? Because I'm looking, apart from pages and CI, like the other ones that are left, all of them are with 100% new teams. When I say new, I mean like new, like 6 to 8, 9 months new folks. So they were probably just utilizing the same concepts that existed around. So unless we can provide them with like, hey, we know for sure this is writing things down, and you are using something, you need to kind of go between these two things and find out what's happening, right?
Yeah.
But
okay.
if we just send them to, hey, can you fix this shared storage thing? I don't know whether that's going to be helpful to anyone actually.
Okay, so I'll do precisely that, and I'll try to grab as much information as I can and plop that into the issues as necessary as I find them. Is there anything else I could be doing here? Because I really don't know except for gathering log data and such. Okay.
From what I'm seeing here, you're doing everything right. It's almost like you did these migrations before. So yeah, I don't think there is anything else. Like I know that this is kind of dragging along a bit, but at the same time, I'm super happy that we are not actually having problems. So
Yeah. I mean, we're at the point where these are the ones that we need to wait for development and engineering
yeah,
work to complete. So
yeah.
like it's
And
going to drag on for a while, unfortunately.
you like if you start collecting this data immediately, right after batch 3, you should see some changes coming up at the same time, meaning you'll be collecting batch 4 data and CI job traces are in their final stages, right? Like there is a merge request open right now that's adding some functionality. That's going to get deployed next week, most likely. So the rollout is going to start mid next week, end of next week, the week after, which means that as soon as this gets rolled out, you should start seeing the drop of those requests for NFS, right?
Yeah. So theoretically, by the time I get to some of these,
Yeah, they might
hopefully
not
some
be.
of them, they won't even use NFS at all at that point. Yeah. And then I could just move them forward. All the others I'll be gathering information for. Okay. Well, that's perfect.
I would even argue, Skarbek, because security scans and requirements management, I would even argue you might want to move them to catch NFS in this batch.
Okay.
And not wait for batch 4.
Okay.
And they might provide you some noise, so it's going to make it more difficult for you to make it like to figure out which one of those is actually creating noise. But at the same time, you said these other ones are so low in traffic that like you're just going to be waiting anyway. So if they start creating too much noise, you definitely then know you have some data, right? Like you can remove it, and we can then parallelize that work with stage groups, and then you leave batch 3 with barely any traffic anyway. So you kind of parallelize it a bit. You can actually roll that out pretty much today, I guess.
Yeah. Okay.
That's just a suggestion. You don't know better what you're seeing. I guess that's how I would
security
approach.
Scans one.
Security scans and the requirements management thingy at the top.
That's the top one. Okay.
Yeah, because it says group certify, and
let's see. Did they give me any information? PARS is CI report, so it probably depends on CI build traces to some extent.
Oh, okay, it's possible, I guess. But the problem I have with this one is that, no. I guess if you think it's related to CI, then you can leave it be. But the problem I have with requirements management is that it's such a new thing that I'm finding it a bit hard to believe that there is not much traffic there to begin with. That's why I'm kind of suggesting maybe use this batch so we can really squash this in one go.
I'm perfectly happy with doing that because I know batch 4 is going to last a little while longer than necessary. So if we do find something running NFS, I could gather that data as quickly as possible, and I could pull that off of this batch and push it into the future. And at that point, we already have InfraDev working on that issue with the information I provided.
Perfect.
Cool. All right. So I will modify my merge requests. So Jarv, you're not on the hook at this moment. Was there anything else I wanted to discover? Yeah, batch 5 was going to be anything else that I needed to, we talked about this, and then batch 6 would be anything that happens after batch 5. So maybe repeating the batch 5 experiment again with a different set of queues. So any opinions or further comments or questions?
As long as you're actually not only sitting and waiting for Sidekick and looking at Sidekick numbers, like how is it reaching NFS, I'm not Amy here, but I would really like to see the Jarv get some help on the cross AZ multi-cluster blah blah thing. Sorry, Jarv, it needs a better name. And the reason for that is not only because Jarv is a release manager now, but it's more if we can parallelize some of this work better for all of us. Because I think the next thing that I want to see is web and API. I don't want to wait for Sidekick to finish for us to start the next step. and given that CI jobs are in their final stages of them starting to roll it out, the sooner we finish multi-AZ, multi-cluster thingy, the better for us. We're better prepared for it.
Yep. I do not disagree with you.
Cool.
That's everything I had to talk about, so.
All right. Well, thanks for sharing. I feel sufficiently confident that we are doing great. So thanks both.
Good. Excellent. Cool. Thank you all.
I'll catch you all later.
Have a good day.
Bye.